Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about the SB 553 Workplace Violence Regulations. And this webinar is hosted by Insurance IOA, which is Insurance Office of America. And Insurance Office of America is a full-service insurance agency founded in 1988 by John Rittenauer and Valley Rittenauer. And today, IOA is led by the chairman and CEO, Keith Rittenauer, and is one of the fastest-growing independent agencies in the United States. IOA is ranked 18th on Insurance Journal's 2021 Top 100 Independent Property and Casualty Agencies report, and is also 28th on Business Insurance's 2021 100 Largest Brokers of U.S. Business list. IOA was also named the National Underwriter Agency of the Year. IOA is headquartered in Longwood, Florida, and has more than 1,300 associates located in over 60 offices in the U.S. and the United Kingdom. We are also hosting the webinar with IOA PBO Advisory Group, and PBO Advisory Group has almost 60 consultants who assess, advise, and provide full or fractional outsourced human resource, accounting, finance, and operational support to businesses throughout the United States. We are trusted advisors that drive client success. And before we get started on our webinar, I wanted to do a few housekeeping items. We will be providing the recording and the deck to all of you later this afternoon. So you can take notes, but know that you'll have the recording. There's also a chat function in the webinar. If you have questions throughout the webinar, we will have a Q&A at the end. And just pop your questions in there, and we'll get your questions answered. I know there were also a few questions that some of you posted while registering for the event, and we'll also get to some of those to the best of our ability. One of those we don't exactly know the answer to, but we'll do our best. And with further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists. So we have our very own Laura Neiman from PBO Advisory Group. And Laura is a seasoned HR professional and has been with the PBO Advisory team since 2012. She's managed the internal HR and operations and has played a key role in building and managing HR service offerings. Her expertise in strategic management and employee relationships allows Laura to collaborate with executives across various industries and ensure compliance and drive strategic initiatives. We have Jeff Heat, who's the managing partner of IOA, and Jeff specializes in risk transfer, risk financing, and risk management, and which makes a substantial impact on the bottom line for his clients. His process focuses on total cost of risk and building a custom insurance program backed by IOA's exclusive risk management process, which is called Risk Score. He provides a full team approach to implement Risk Score process and reduce his clients' total cost of risk. And then we have Mohammed Malki, who's a risk management specialist. And as a risk management specialist, Malki applies his enthusiasm for nonprofits to his book of business, partnering with his clients to tailor their coverage to their niche needs. Malki also works with clients in tech, real estate, manufacturing, and construction. And Malki has the opportunity to speak on a panel at a Plus event, which shares his expertise on exposures unique to nonprofits, as well as lead webinars regarding employee practice liability insurance and cyber coverage. And finally, we have Adam Lopez, who's a commercial lines producer with IOA. Adam holds over 2 decades of experience in safety and loss control, claims management, health and environmental coverage, and risk management. His career has spanned national corporations across various industries where he successfully lowered experience modification rates, reduced claims costs, and enhanced employee safety. Known for his dedication to clients' best interests, Adam focuses on improving risk management programs to achieve optimal outcomes. And so we're going to get started really right now with this incredible panel. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to really ask Laura the first question. If she could give us a little background about SB 553 and what the impetus of it and what we're faced with.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I thought that we should probably start by defining what we're actually talking about, and that's what workplace violence is. And the official definition of workplace violence is any act of violence or threat of violence that occurs in a place of employment. And a threat of violence can be anything that's verbal, written statement, or any behavioral or physical conduct that conveys an intent or that's reasonably perceived to convey an intent to cause harm or to place someone in fear of physical harm, and that serves no legitimate purpose. And that can include texts, electronic messages, social media messages, or other online posts. And for the history behind it, according to OSHA, almost 1 in 4 workers have witnessed workplace violence happening to another employee in the last 5 years, and 12% have been the target of workplace violence themselves. And currently, only about 44% of workers strongly agree that their employers promote a speak up culture where employees can report misconduct without fear of retaliation. So in September of last year, California Senate Bill 553, SB 553, was enacted in response to the rising number of mass shootings, incidences of workplace violence in the state and the US more broadly. So the bill requires employers to maintain an effective plan to mitigate workplace violence and to provide interactive training to all of their employees. And the legislation is similar to a workplace violence prevention standards that was implemented for the healthcare industry in 2017 by Cal OSHA. This bill, however, applies to all employers and industries in general with just a small number of exceptions. And although the limit is limited right now to employers in California, there is some speculation that similar legislation may be considered in other states in coming years, that this is kind of like that baseline that is going to go from there. It applies to most employers, employees, places of employment, and employer-provided housing. Those exceptions are healthcare settings because they have their own guidelines, and prisons and law enforcement. Work from home, that means 100% work from home, completely out of the employer's control. And places that have less than 10 employees, that's not accessible to the public and still complies with IIPP regulations. So you still have to identify hazards. But I mean, that's very specific. You literally can't have any interaction ever or any potential of interaction with anybody in the public. The new law requires a workplace violence prevention plan, employee training that has to be interactive, and maintenance of a violent incident log. And the basic requirements are that you have to establish, implement, and maintain the effective workplace violence prevention plan. It has to be in writing, has to be accessible to all employees, authorized employee reps, and Cal OSHA, and it could be standalone or part of an IIPP.
Wow, that's a lot.
Sorry, I know I threw a lot at you.
and as you know, California implements these laws. I think you're spot on, Laura. The rest of the country kind of looks to California and emulates those laws. Are Adam or any of the IOA team, but Adam, maybe you can talk to this. Are you seeing clients that have a presence in California, but maybe they have other locations outside of California implementing the plan that goes broadly across each of their locations?
Yes, good morning. So I'll definitely give an answer and then hand it out to my colleagues. So we are seeing that we have clients who, although they're in California, so they implement a plan, and across the board, they want to be consistent, right? Because like Laura mentioned, there's no secret that some states are going to follow suit after this bill. So we're definitely seeing that it's consistent training, consistent written plan, and the requirements are being followed, whether you're in California or multi-state. That's what our clients are doing.
Okay. And so we're going to get into the details of, how we create a workplace violence program in a moment. Do we have a sense of how this law will be enforced, Laura?
So right now, that's still one of the things that the insurance folks may have a better knowledge on. But what I'm being told from the attorneys that I've been speaking with is that, it takes effect on July 1, and there are going to be more people out there investigating. But the biggest thing is you don't want to be that employee that if heaven forbid something happens, or that company that if something happens and you don't have what you need to have in place. And that's going to be the big things is if there is an act of workplace violence, what do you do? What's going to happen afterwards? Because you do have to report it to OSHA. What if there are police reports filed? What if there are all of those things and you get, somebody coming in to take a look at all of your records and you don't have them, or they're not complete, or any variation on a theme?
So Adam, is the enforcement agency OSHA right now, or do we know?
That's a very interesting question. Like Laura said, it's very vague in nature. We don't understand yet what's going to happen. However, the bill strictly, it's in detail what it says. It says the bill will require the division to enforce a workplace violence prevention plan and related requirements by issuance of a citation and a notice of civil penalty if it's not complied with or the requirements are not there. Who's going to enforce that? That is still to be known. I did mention to this group prior to this webinar that we're trying to coordinate a meeting with the governor's office to get more clarity. We discussed about the training. It's very vague. What is the requirement? How long should the training be? What's the content of the training? Who's going to enforce this during what time? Is it going to be OSHA? Is it going to be Division of Labor? Does the governor have a specific team? It's unknown at this time who's going to be enforcing that, but the bill does say that they will be issuing citations and a notice of civil penalty for those that are not in compliance.
Okay, so there you have it. So more to come. We are staying on top of the legislation and the refinement and further definition of enforcement. But we do know we have to have a workplace violence program in place by July 1. That we do know. So we all need to start to look at that. Malky or Jeff, are we seeing, this is so new, are the underwriters with insurance companies as you go into renewal, are they asking for these types of documents for underwriting?
No, they're not, and they won't be. It's not something they typically get into when it comes to regulation. And even more basic than that, Laura mentioned and Adam mentioned about a lot of unknowns about the law. The bigger issue I'm seeing and talking to a lot of my clients, especially on the smaller side, under 100, under 50 employees, is this is still under the radar for a lot of business owners and operators. Most people don't even know that this is around the corner and this is coming. And the ones that have seen it kind of saw an email on it, said, yeah, this probably doesn't apply to me, and they move on. It applies, as Laura mentioned, to almost every business. So it's critical. You need to get on top of it.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that even some folks who have been required by, for example, the healthcare one from 2017, 2018, I think there's a lot of folks that aren't direct healthcare that may not even be aware of the fact that they are supposed to have been abiding by that one, since 2018. So I think exactly what Malky just said, there's a lot of information that people just don't know what they don't know. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is getting this information out there for everyone to know. It's not just something that's coming down the pike. It's something that has to be implemented by July 1. So it doesn't mean start thinking about it in July. It means exactly what we're doing now, which is start thinking about it now, start working on your plan. And it's going to probably take close to that long to get it fully implemented and up and running by July.
We even mentioned IIPP a couple of times on this call, and I guarantee you there's some people on this call that are not familiar with IIPP, and every business needs to have it. So it's an injury and illness prevention plan.
That's true.
A lot of businesses that are not aware that they're subject to that.
Very, very true. So, Michael, with that, can you move to the next slide? And we're going to talk really now about getting prepared and in compliance for our July 1 deadline, and how we are going to create a workplace violence plan. And here we have said incorporated into your IIPP, and Laura has indicated actually it can be a standalone or it can be incorporated into your IIPP. If you don't have an IIPP, this is a perfect opportunity for you to tackle both. So Laura, can you tell us a little bit about how we can approach developing a workplace violence plan?
Yeah, so I will say that Cal OSHA has put out a template that you can use, and you don't have to use their template, but it's there. And I know that for PBO, for example, with our clients, and I think IOA has their own version of this, we're going to be helping to facilitate the process with our clients. We can't do it for them because it has to be something that's a living, breathing document, and it has to have, you know, insight and people actually actively working it on the employment side from the company's perspective. But we can help facilitate it, and that template's a good place to start if you're wanting to just kind of see what it is that you need to be thinking about. But the plan is going to have to list specific hazards, corrective measures for each work area in the operation. You're going to have to present the different types of risks that you're going to have to be looking at. You know, do you have different job sites? Do you have, you know, I'm in an office right now, and what are the things that are going to happen when I walk in and out the door? You know, those different types of things. And then you have to list, you know, you've got to know who's going to be managing it from the employment side. So you really have to start to figure that out. Probably step one, who's going to be the owner of this and who's going to take charge of it, and then who else is going to be involved in it. It's really starting to sit down and take a look at everything around you and thinking about, this isn't your accident plan, this is workplace violence. So it's a little bit different, but there's 4 different types of workplace violence. So you have to start to look at, what are the different types? How can they happen? You know, is it going to be a spouse or a former spouse that's walking in the door angry with their partner? Or are you in a customer service environment where you've got angry customers that may walk through the door? Or, you know, any of those variations, and they can all be different. And so I think that's part of step one, is starting to really think about and evaluate what all of those different types of things that can happen are, and how to mitigate those risks.
So I know personally with some of my clients that I think where we have had the most concern with workplace violence would either be on the customer side or a disgruntled employee. For instance, if you're having to terminate an employee and you have concerns about that, does that get incorporated into a workplace violence plan? Yes,
but it depends on, you know, there's certain things that you can't think about in advance, but I had somebody recently say this, that, you know, the best plan is going to be the one that nobody notices, because you've already been proactive and you've made sure that you don't have anything happen to the company. But you do have to start to think about, if you're going to have a potential of something happening and you know that there's that potential, how do you mitigate that? Do you take care of that termination off-site? Do you ensure that you have security around just in case? Do you clear your office space if you think that something might happen? You know, what are the different options to be preventative? So you always kind of have to start thinking in advance about those options. But you also have a lot of situations where you just don't know. So you've got to have people be aware of the situations. I mean, you can have workplace violence, you know, against an employee by a present or a former employee. You can have violence by somebody that has absolutely no relationship to the company, no reason to be there. And how do you prepare for that? So, you know, we know there's a lot of different things out there, and that's why this is having to be thought about now versus later.
So Adam, do you have clients that are starting to look at this as well? And are you seeing a pattern of who is that owner of the workplace violence plan?
Yeah, a very good question. Just to piggyback on what Laura was mentioning, the best way to look at this is, when you create your workplace violence plan, you're really looking at each scenario that can possibly occur at the workplace. and then you share the preventative action. This is going to be our controls. This is going to be our preventative action in case there's an active shooter, in case there's a physical threat, in case there's a disgruntled employee. You can't plan ahead, but you're thinking of this is what we're going to do. Our clients, what we're seeing, Fran, is many different levels. For example, Malky said we have clients who are on the smaller scale, 20, 30 people who they're under the radar, they have no clue what's going on. But then you have those organizations who are larger and they're like, okay, let's do the active shooter prevention training. Let's have a whole workplace violence and more robust, more consistent. And I think we have to really worry about all the companies, right? But those smaller clients who need a lot more guidance. But to answer your question, what I'm seeing is the safety directors, the safety managers, the risk managers in collaboration with the HR teams are the ones that are pretty much they're the key holders. They're running this program. They're controlling the program to make sure not only that it's enforced and implemented, but that there's consistent training. Now, keep in mind that Laura mentioned it in the beginning. The workplace violence plan, it's going to include the workplace violence written program. You're going to have to record information on any violent incidents. It's going to be an incident log. So there's multiple phases of the workplace violence plan. It's just not a written plan and training. No, you're going to have to record every violent situation. You're going to have to train and then retrain on an annual basis. It's a lot of moving parts. And for those that are listening, we might be throwing a lot at you, but at least we're getting the essentials out there that this is very important and it's coming July 1st. Now, keep in mind that SB 533 was the workplace violence plan that first came out, but it wasn't mandated. SB 553 now it's mandated and it's not optional. It must be in place. So I'm going to just finish with this: 4 things: your written plan, your record of violent threats, your training, and then your annual retraining. That's what we need to remember, that it's the workplace violence plan. Now, the last point, it could be part of your IAPP. Now, this is where it's very vague. Now, is it going to be just a little paragraph? Is it going to be a disclaimer in the IPP? Is it going to be one sentence? Going to be a standalone? My professional opinion to everybody is make it a standalone program, make it more efficient. You cannot go wrong with making it standalone, because now you're more effective, you're more efficient, you're more ahead of the game. You incorporate it into your injury illness prevention plan or even your emergency action plan. Still make it a robust section within that plan, not just a one-pager, have employees sign and you're done. Like Laura said, it's got to be interactive. It's a living, breathing document, interactive, engaging training. So again, throwing a lot at you, but this is what we're seeing about the plan.
Yep, it's so important, Adam. So what I'm really hearing from you all is this law is attempting to help us build a culture around safety. So the culture of safety is broad and vast, right? We've got safety, we've got IIPP, we've got emergency action plan, we have workplace violence. And so it really is about integrating, first understanding who's going to own this plan, and then integrating, the written documents, the record keeping, the training and the annual training, which requires many stakeholders in an organization, as well as really a culture of adopting proactive measures for preventing these types of situations, whether it be IIP, workplace violence, et cetera. So Laura, is there an approach that we should be working with clients on to prevent this, whatever potential could be in a workplace violence situation?
Yeah, we're in the process of working together to put a project management kind of a task together on our end to assist our clients. But part of that is still going to be that the clients are going to have to sit down. So everybody who's listening, you're still going to have to start thinking about this. We can't go out to every single site and help you you have to do for yourself to a certain degree of this. And you're the ones that are going to know what your chances are of where people are going to be having opportunities to come in and what the risks and the threats are in some of the locations. We're a great outside voice to help then to kind of dial through that and say, what about this? What about this? But your team has to start thinking about it and noting what those different locations are. Who's going to be in charge of the training? We can help set you up for the training, but it still has to be something from your own organization where you've got somebody who's owning it on that end. like I said, we can help you train the trainer. But then, you know, there's also the other things to think about that, you know, what if there is a workplace violence, something happens, you know, you've still got to investigate it. You know, think about harassment prevention training. You know, it can't just be that one training you do a year and then, you know, nothing else ever happens. Well, something may happen. And then what do you do when that happens? And how do you follow through on that? And that also has to be part of this plan.
So Adam, there's a question in the chat that I don't know if you know the answer to, but it says, will the civil penalties increase with each infraction for failure to comply? So
that is not listed in the bill. I'm just reading it. I'm reading it right now, and it says existing law requires the division to issue with reasonable promptness a citation to an employer if upon inspection or investigation the division believes they're out of compliance. It does not talk about repeat offenses, doesn't talk about the seriousness of the offense, but it's very specific what the plan requires. That is very specific. That's not vague, so we understand that. Is there repeat? Not sure. If there's a citation, how much time, how many days you have to correct it or rebuttal or appeal it? It's not, that doesn't say it either. However, let's just take the notion that just out of principle, just have everything by July 1st. I mean, let's just, you know, consider that, right? But to your point, everybody, we're here to guide you. We're here to put you in compliance. But and Laura mentioned earlier, there is a template, but I wanted to say this before it skips my mind. The template or the plan is not one size fits all. You cannot take one program for a food packing house and apply it to an office setting. Totally different environment. You have to customize it according to your work site. You know, very, very specific. Every threat, every situation, every scenario is going to be different. From a recycling plant to a oil refinery to an office setting to a dental office. It's so completely, totally different. So you have to customize and make the plan according to, you say it right there, to the specific need of your company. So keep that in mind. So that's my long-winded answer to your question. Is there going to be, you know, is the citation going to increase on the severity or repeat offenses? That is something to be known, and hopefully we get answers soon.
Very good. Yep. Someone's asking if they'll have a list, if we'll have a list of all the requirements. I think the requirements are so customized to each individual company's situation. I mean, we have a lot of schools that are clients of ours, and of course that would be a very different situation than, say, a construction site. So we really would, we need to identify the stakeholder or the owner of the plan within each of the companies, and then coach them through all of the considerations to start to have an outline to develop the plan that works for each individual organization. So Laura, with that, given that, you know, we are kind of coaching up our clients to develop the plan, once the plan is developed, what is the recommendation on integrating into the culture and training the stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that's going to be, again, individual by the organization and depending upon the culture of the organization and how they do things. But it's going to be something that you do have to train immediately. So by July 1st, we need to do the first training. And then we're going to be working with clients for things like incorporating it into your onboarding. You know, how are you getting this across when you bring new employees onto the company, and then annualized training. And then again, if heaven forbid something happens, then you also have to deal with new training. So in any time there is a workplace violence incident, then you also have to retrain based on that and how you're mitigating those factors. And so I think it's one of those things that the person who's in charge and or the team who's in charge has to really have a little bit of a passion for it and has to understand the importance of it and take that on. And we're probably going to help start working on, you know, calendaring things. What are the dates that you need to start looking at things as an ongoing, you know? So, you know, here's your annualized, here's how to keep track of it. Here's, you know, how often should you be quarterly checking in on your different locations? Is it up to date? You know, just because we created it last year, I mean, how many of our other programs do we create and then we don't look at them again? And then, you know, a year later, we're like, what were we thinking? You know, how did we miss all of these other things? And so that's pretty much how we're going to be helping to facilitate it.
I think it's really, to Adam's point, even the record keeping. So defining what an incident is and how we're going to keep track of it. I mean, there's so much to learn, and how it applies to each of our organizations, and then how we're going to, keep track of it, train, maintain, all of the things, incorporate into onboarding. It's a whole program in and of itself. I'm glad you guys are working on this, because I as a person who works in an employer situation, I'm like, wow, we've got to get this going. It's a little overwhelming to think about, but having somebody kind of walk us through all of the considerations would be very useful from kind of an outsider navigational point of view looking in. So let's talk a little bit about what are the next steps to get compliant, period. We know we have a July 1st date. We know we need to have a plan in place. Adam, what are you seeing with your clients? What are they doing? Especially those, a lot of the folks on the call may be, at a low risk, let's say. So what do we need to do to make sure we're compliant, to check the box and then refine over time?
Yeah, again, good question, and we've discussed this in preparation for the webinar. Please don't make the mistake of making it a one pager and just sign here and you're done. A lot of companies will take that route just because, let's be honest, it's time consuming, right? Some people are stretched too thin. I don't have time for this. It's another regulation. But in reality, let's keep in mind that we're trying to create a really good, robust, and bulletproof safety culture. Of course, some things are inevitable, but you still have to have a plan in place. Now, keep in mind also that the employer, and this is directly from the bill, an employer shall establish, implement, and maintain an effective workplace violence prevention plan, which includes, like Laura said, in writing, living, breathing document. Your training needs to be engaging. So this will be my recommendations. Have your written plan, whether it's going to be embedded or incorporated with your IPP, your emergency action plan, or be a standalone program. Just have a written program. Whoever's going to be the gatekeeper of that program, make sure their name is included on the document, sign it, revised today, April 9, 2024. We know that it's up to date. Enforce it, implement it through training. Make sure you train your executives, upper management, your supervisors, your leads, your managers, down to the floor level of what this plan entails. That is something that's very specific in the bill. The bill's indicating you must train all employees on the components and the contents of this plan. You cannot just say, hey, we have a written plan. It's effective July 1st, workplace violence, sign here, we're done. No, go to each step. This is what the plan says. This is what our company's policy says about this. This is the approach we're going to take when you have this scenario, and that scenario. Once you have the plan, you train, it's documented, right? And then also keep a log. Maybe your log's going to be empty or have no content at the end of the year, your violence or your threats. However, just keep a log, just title it, violence or threats, record keeping, documentation, because you have to keep record keeping. And then remember that every year you must train on this plan, whether there's changes or not. It has to be an annual training. Now, a couple of things before I give it to my colleagues. The plan, it says here, strictly on the bill, the plan shall include names or job titles of the persons responsible for implementing the plan, effective procedures to obtain the active involvement of employees and authorized employee representatives in developing and implementing the plan, methods the employer will use to coordinate implementation of the plan with other employers when applicable, effective procedures for the employer to accept and respond to reports of workplace violence and to prohibit retaliation against an employee who makes such a report, effective procedures to ensure the supervisor and non-supervisory employees comply with the plan, and effective procedures to communicate with employees regarding the workplace violence matters. So as you can see, it's very detailed. It's telling you what to do, how to do it, and when to include. So that would be my recommendation. Have your written plan. Don't make it very generic or superficial. Enforce it, implement it, do training, get your violence record intact, and also do annual training. And that it would suffice with the requirements. That would be enough.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, we really need to approach this as a full program. So does every employee need to sign that violence, or just the stakeholders who are managing, implementing, and monitoring the plan? Do you know?
Everybody's going to have to get a copy of it, but then that's part of the training. So then there is a sign off that every employee has received the training when they've received the training. And again, you don't want to be that company that something happens and you don't have the backup, because I think that's really going to be what happens. Is that's where the real fines and the real challenges are going to come into play, is if you're the company that didn't do the pieces that you need to do and something happens.
Yeah, so let me add to that.
Laura, I was going to say, I have a quick question. So what if you just did the training and then you hire some new employees? Are you supposed to train them right away too, or what's the plan with that?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's why we're talking about incorporating it into part of your onboarding. So when new employees come on, the same as you train them on your company culture, the same as you and train them on harassment prevention policies, all of those things. This just has to become another one of those things that becomes a part of, when people are joining your organization, what they need to know, and has to be, and then it's annual training from there.
So to add to that, Jeff, the bill strictly indicates that training should be given when there's new hazards introduced to the work site, when new scenarios or different scenarios are now observed, identified, and then also new employees as well. But I want to go back very quickly on the last question. So it says, the plan should include the names or job titles of the person responsible for implementing the plan. If there are multiple persons responsible for the plan, their roles shall be clearly described on the plan. And those are the only individuals signing the plan. These are the gatekeepers. But to Laura's point, every employee will have to sign either a roster sheet or a receipt of acknowledgement, something that indicates they received the actual plan.
Right. So I envision this being we approach this very similarly to harassment prevention training, right? You have your training plan, you incorporate it into your onboarding, you calendar it to make sure you're compliant. So it's not just the writing of the plan, but it's also the ongoing maintenance. I envision some videos will be recorded for new hires, so we have a workplace violence prevention plan training right then and there.
I don't know if you can.
Yes, but no. I mean, it has to be interactive. Oh. So you do have to actually have a human being that's sitting there saying, here are some specifics of our plan, asking questions. And I think to go to the point of comparing it to the harassment prevention training, that is one difference. Harassment prevention, you can just say, here's our plan. We don't do it. Here's a video. But the companies that are really successful are the ones that really incorporate it into their culture. And it becomes from the top down, really and truly, that they truly believe what they're talking about. And I think that's the same thing here. The companies that are going to be successful are the ones that it really is embedded into the culture. It really does come from the top, that this is important. We believe in it, and we want to make sure that we're keeping our employees safe and happy, and there's no retaliation for letting us know if something's different than that.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. So do we see issues, Malky, with insurance coverage and liability issues related to workplace violence claims or lawsuits?
Yeah, definitely. The coverage exists. It's part of what's called crisis risks coverage, which could be terrorism coverage, active shooter coverage, or workplace violence coverage. I'll concentrate specifically on the workplace violence because that's kind of what we're talking about. The active shooter coverage requires an actual active shooter. Workplace violence doesn't. Terrorism coverage requires that the event is deemed a terrorist event. Workplace violence doesn't. So some of you on the call probably already have this coverage. If you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, social service company, school, it's part of your management liability, D&O. And it's specifically called workplace violence coverage. And you'll see it as either part of the EPLI or a subsection of the D&O. And it carries a couple of different components on it that are important in terms of the coverage standpoint. It'll cover business income coverage. So if you have an event, you have to shut down for a while, They'll cover those expenses. They also cover PR expenses because it's probably going to get in the news and you're going to need to hire a PR company. And that's something that's included in the coverage. And it also includes coverage for missed salaries for employees being off of work. So, and it's relatively affordable at this point. I mean, you're talking about, like, take a standard D&O policy and you have D&O, EPL, and workplace violence. Workplace violence is only probably like 10% of the premium or less. It's not something that's out of range because fortunately or unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of claims on this because not a lot of people have had events, which is great. And also, not everybody has this coverage. It's something that you definitely should look into. It's not going to break the bank. And it's kind of the last line of defense against this. And I know there's a question coming down the line. I'll answer it now because I want to kick it back to Jeff for some practical stuff. The triggers on these policies is not you waiting for somebody to sue you or put in a claim or something. The event itself is the trigger for the claim. So the event happens, you can put in a claim immediately. You don't have to wait for something else to happen. Just the fact that an event happened, workplace violence event, that's enough to satisfy a claim requirement. So the carrier will have to respond at that moment, that same day or the very next day. So
Malky, I have a question about that then. Does that also include the threat of violence?
Yeah, if it causes an incident, yes. Yes, if it causes an employee to say, hey, so-and-so threatened me, I can't come back to my desk, I'm gone for the week or whatever, that is an incident. That could trigger a claim, for sure. But you asked earlier, Fran, about kind of what are next steps, what can we do? And we've been kind of working on that behind the scenes for our clients, and Jeff has some details on practical steps you can take to get yourself ready for putting a plan together.
And so as far as putting a plan together, I'd recommend that, first of all, if you're working with PBO, reach out to Laura and talk to her about what you guys can do, what the next steps are, because like they're saying, it does need to be a living, breathing plan, interactive. With us on our side at IOA, we have Adam, who's one of our loss control guys and also a producer. He can help with giving you ideas, pointing you in the right direction, helping you put together the plan, helping assist with the training, active shooter training, all the different trainings around that. Then we also have a program that we use a lot too. This is more for clients that want to check the box, but they don't want to be as interactive with it. Maybe they have a lower exposure to this. They have to have it, but it's not a big need for them. Is we have a program through a company called Got Safety, and they will put together a plan for our clients. We'll put together an IIPP. It's all separate pieces of IIPP, which the workplace violence is also a part of that. It's not going to be integrated into the IIPP, but it's just a separate document that's included. And they do that for most of our clients at no cost. So that's something that you can get put together. And then, they can show you on how to train for that and stuff too. Because it just really depends on the size of your company. If you're a larger company, you have the exposure. Like I was talking to a guy that owns a bunch of hotels yesterday. They've been having issues with homeless people. And these are Hiltons too. Homeless people, that's why they have key cards just to use the bathrooms and stuff anymore. Breaking into the hotel when the maids aren't looking, going into the rooms and showering and using the room. So they're worried about what if a guest shows up and there's a homeless person in the shower, that could lead to a violent act. So, there's a lot of different exposures to look for. So working with someone like Adam to really identify those would be my main recommendation.
Yeah, and there was a question about, is anybody exempt? Like, is a church exempt? And based on the definition that you gave, there are very few exemptions, and the healthcare already has their own law, which has been in effect for a while. So it sounds like if you have 10 employees, Laura, was that the number?
Yeah, it's any places that have less than 10 employees that are not accessible to the public and still comply with the IIPP regulation of analyzing your hazards. So you have to really think about this. A church is not going to fit that category because even if there's only a couple of people that are actually employed, they're definitely not, they're definitely accessible to the public. And, you know, so the odds of having a place that, again, I'm in an office, we don't always come in here very often. I may be the only person in here, but it's still an office building. And so it's still, you know, open. There's still the possibility of the public having access in some form or fashion. So when they say less than 10 people, you really have to think, though, how dialed in that has to be with no access to the public.
Yeah. And so that also, and you mentioned remote work and hybrid work. So a hybrid worker would technically be exposed to the public at some point in time because they'd be coming to an office potentially.
Correct. Yeah, it's the time when they're in the office. So when they are working from home, the employer has no control over that. So there is no responsibility for the times that you are working from your home. If you are in a, you know, you're going to a WeWork kind of a situation, that's different. You're back into a public exposure area. So then that has its own regulations.
Right. And so for PBO, we go to clients as well. So if we're in a client setting, do we need to ensure our clients have a plan in place? Okay.
Yeah, so that goes back to what Adam had listed earlier about the communication and coordination of other employment sites. So if you're in a multi-unit site and there are more than one employer, think it could be a construction site with subcontractors, it could be an office building, it could be, you know, professional services going out to your clients. You have to coordinate to make sure they have a plan and knowing in your plan what their plan is. And so there's that facilitation as well. And that's going to be a big piece that people aren't thinking about. Like, this is really trying to say everybody in the building has to be on the same page.
Brian, I have a question for Laura and Adam. I heard earlier, I think Adam, you mentioned retraining if your exposures change. Does that also mean, let's say you move your office or your facility to a new location? Does that trigger retraining?
Absolutely. It's a whole different environment, new location, different threats, different exposure. So yes.
So I think, yeah, for people listening, it's when you're putting this plan together, you have to also assess your physical, you know, characteristics of your facility. That's going to have to be part of the plan. So I'm a fierce advocate for my clients, and it's getting more and more difficult every day doing business in California. This is an important thing for sure. We want to protect everybody, but it's just, people roll their eyes like, one more thing I have to do. It's frustrating, but you have to do it.
Well, and I've had people ask me, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's why I recommend working with a professional, whether it's Adam or some other safety consultant. You know, have somebody that you can talk to about this. Don't try to do it all on your own.
Yes, it's overwhelming. I mean, and you're so close to your business sometimes, I think you can't even see all of the potentialities for a situation. And so that's where it's really helpful to have Adam or Laura look at it from a slightly outsider's view. And also with the lens of safety and insurance risk is also really important. Okay, so given that we have, there was also another question, which is a really interesting one, and I'm going to slightly shift the question, which is, this one it says, will TriNet offer online training to staff? And really TriNet, so for those of you who aren't familiar with TriNet is a professional employment organization. And so with PEOs, do we know yet if the PEO is being responsible for implementing these plans or introducing these plans, or does that fall to the employer?
I'm going to say it likely falls to the employer. I would go with the PEO, HRIS, payroll company that may have training, that they have some form of a video that you can watch. I know a couple of them have come out with that, and I've had to educate those direct managers to say, that's great, this is a really good piece of your training, but it's not your full training that you're going to do. But I think as the employer, I would take the responsibility. If your PEO is going to help guide you through it, like PBO is going to do with our clients, that's one thing. But ultimately, you as the employer, you hold the ultimate responsibility.
Yeah, I do quite a bit.
So those of you who have PEO, go ahead, Malky.
Yeah, no, I do quite a bit of work with PEOs. I place clients with PEOs that, where there's a good fit, and you got to be careful. Laura's exactly right. This is all going to fall back on the employer, because in the PEO contract, for the most part, all the ones I've seen, for the most part, will say we're not going to get involved in your day-to-day business. So it's on you, the employer, to basically spearhead this. They'll send out emails, they'll offer some solutions, but it's not on them. It's on you.
Yeah, very good point. It doesn't hurt to reach out to your PEO, but you need to get going on developing the plan and then incorporating it into your systems with the PEO. Okay.
I would put the onus on them to help you put it together, because you're paying your PEO for HR support.
And I know that, like, we have clients that use some PEOs that still use us for some support, because there still sometimes has to be a point person that's kind of that in between the PEO and in between the employer. And that's where we often fill a role for some of our clients who are on something like that system. And again, that's where any resources you can get that they're paying for, that you're already paying for with their system, take advantage of it. But you still may need somebody like an Adam or myself to help just facilitate and play that go between for you.
Definitely for the implementation. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So next steps. There are, what I'm hearing from you is there are a variety of resources that people can go to for you on the call to have us review your safety plans, your IIP plans, your emergency action plans, your workplace violence plans. They're all kind of integrated, or they're probably standalone plans, but they all probably touch each other. So Adam, Laura, if you've got a PEO, reach out to those organizations. You definitely need to have someone who owns this in your company. So that person is going to be listed on the documents, their title, what their responsibilities are. If it's multiple people, like Adam said, we need to be listing which person is responsible for which function. And be really clear in that. There is, like Laura mentioned, a Cal OSHA outline sample plan. It is not probably going to suit most of your needs. You're going to have to customize it, but it is a place to start, because it'll at least get you thinking about the components of what's needed. We can probably send that link to that form when we send out the webinar deck, so that you all have an easy link to that. That's something we can do for you all. And then we're happy to provide additional support, review, etc. I don't see any more questions in the chat. In closing, I'd love to just, sure.
I was just going to say, Laura, whenever you guys send that out, you can send that incident log too. So they have the sample log, kind of gives them a good structure to follow when recording an incident.
Perfect.
And we can also send a link to the bill. Not that we expect that you'll all be reading that, but it is a good guidepost. And what we do know, and what Adam has eloquently pointed out, is that the bill is sometimes unclear about exactly what reinforcement or enforcement will look like, who the governing body is going to be. So there's more to come on this, and the IOA team is, tied into the governor's office. So as we get updates, we will send that information out to those of you on this webinar, because this is a living, breathing document and plan, and so we will evolve it as the laws evolve. And I want to thank you all for attending today. Thank you, Melky, Laura, Jeff, and Adam, for your wisdom and insight into this new SB 553. It is overwhelming for some of us as employers, but with your guidance, we will likely get through it.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Again, want to thank IOA and PBO, and we will be sending out information. If you do have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to all of us. The contact information is down here below. Everybody's email is here. Send us emails. We're happy to answer questions or get on a call with you and see how we can support your development of your workplace violence prevention plan. Thanks, everyone. Have a very good day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.